All right, everybody. So I wanted to take a little break from the. I'm between recording these off air and doing it on, live. I'm not really following a consistent pattern, but for myself, I wanted to break things up. So I figured I would do. There's two chapters in my book on music, so I thought that would be a good one to do, um, especially because the second chapter is about one of my favorite Christmas music things. So that's appropriate for the season. Um, but before I start reading them, Yoav was instructing me to go figure out Google's Notebook LM, and I made a little overview video for the whole book, which was kind of weird. It kind of highlighted like not maybe the things that I would have thought as the central aspects, but it's such a big book, it's hard to do. So then I started trying to make some littler ones on based on smaller chunks. So I made a video of the two chapters on music, and I uploaded it to YouTube, and I haven't watched it yet. So I'm going to watch this with you, whoever is there watching, as a first experience checking this out.
Have you ever scrolled way back on your Spotify, found an old playlist, and just thought, wow, I really listened to that? We've all been there. Today, we're diving deep into exactly that, how our musical taste grows and changes over time. And we're going to do it by exploring a story from chapters 42 and 43 of the book, Tents Before Temples, which tracks this amazing journey from forbidden rock music all the way to understanding how songs become part of who we are.
So let me just start with this question for you. What happens when the music you absolutely love is forbidden? You know, when a parent or teacher tells you you are not allowed to listen to that. That tension, that pull between what you're drawn to and what's totally off limits.
Already, this is like, wow, that's the central thing it pulls out. Like, I don't know. I guess we'll see when I read the chapters. I haven't read them for a little while, but interesting.
Well, that's right at the heart of the story we're unpacking today. And this quote, it just nails the forbidden fruit effect, doesn't it? In Tents Before Temples, the author talks about watching this old VHS tape called Hell's Bells. It was supposed to scare kids away from rock music, warning them about all these hidden satanic messages. But it had the complete opposite effect. Instead of being scary, it basically became a shopping list. The attempt to ban the music just made it way more exciting and, ironically, gave them a roadmap to find even more of it. So, yeah, that brings us right into our first big idea here. That initial, powerful pull towards a world of sound that feels dangerous and thrilling, pretty much because you're not supposed to go there. And for the author, the stakes were incredibly high. I mean, think about it. As a pastor's son, heavy metal wasn't just frowned upon, it was seen as fundamentally wrong. This created this huge internal battle. Suddenly, the music wasn't just music anymore. It was an act of rebellion. It was a way to carve out an identity for himself that was completely separate from the one he'd been handed.
Of course, that private rebellion, that headphone listening in your bedroom, it doesn't stay private forever. For the author, his interest in this forbidden music eventually led him out into the local scene, a whole subculture with its own rules, its own language, and, you bet, its own set of challenges.
And the scene he found himself in was all about a genre called melodic metalcore. Okay, so picture this. It's a mix of total extremes. You've got these super heavy, chunky guitar riffs and really intense screaming, but then, bam, it switches to these beautiful melodic guitar parts and clean, sung vocals. This combo created a very specific, kind of unspoken set of skills that every band got judged by. And check this out. The scene had this clear, informal ladder of skills. It was a total proving ground. You know, at the very bottom, you had to be able to play the heavy stuff, those chunky riffs and breakdowns. That was step one. Then you needed to handle the twinkly clean bits, those more intricate melodic parts. For vocals, you could get by with a decent articulate shout, but the real peak of the mountain, the ultimate test that separated the good bands from the great ones, that was real, honest-to-God singing. And the pressure difference between screaming and singing was just massive. The book explains that you could be respected for all kinds of screaming styles. It was more about the energy, the vibe. But bad singing? Oh man. Just a couple of off-key notes and it was, and I'm quoting here, a death blow to a band career. That was it. Singing was what separated the kids just making noise from the artists who could actually make you feel something. So, what happens after you've spent years fighting your way up that ladder? Well, just like us, artists and their music, they evolve, they grow up. And this next part is all about that process of maturing, which happens not just to the bands making the music, but to the fans growing up right alongside them.
This line from Tense Before Temples just says it all, doesn't it? For so many of these aggressive bands, there comes a time when that youthful rage starts to fade into something a bit more thoughtful. The music gets less about pure aggression and more about texture, melody, and lyrics that actually mean something deeper. It's this really natural shift from yelling at the world to looking inside yourself.
But how do the fans handle it? Well, there are pretty much two ways it can go. You've got the young fan, the one who fell in love with that original angry sound. They often feel totally betrayed. They're the ones in the comments yelling sellouts and begging the band to go back to the old stuff. But then you have the mature fan, the one who's grown up with the band. They get it. They appreciate the evolution. They understand that inward turn in the lyrics because, hey, they've probably been on a similar journey themselves.
And that shared journey brings us to our final and maybe most important section, the incredible, almost magical power of music to latch onto our memories and our emotions, often when we least expect it.
As the author of Tense Before Temples points out, even someone who claims to hate an entire genre of music like country might have that one country song that just wrecks them because it was played at a wedding or a funeral. It's such a powerful reminder that a song's real meaning often has nothing to do with the genre and everything to do with the life we were living when we heard it.
And sometimes a lyric just hits you right in the gut with a truth you didn't even know you needed to hear. These lines quoted in the book, they just perfectly capture that feeling of losing something from childhood, something pure and good that's just gone. And that feeling isn't unique to one person's story. It's a shared human experience of loss and nostalgia that we can all connect with.
So, in the end, our relationship with music really is a mirror for our journey through life, isn't it? It can start as an act of rebellion, it can mature into quiet reflection, and eventually it becomes the soundtrack to our most important memories. So, I'll leave you with this to think about. What song holds a powerful memory for you? What piece of music is forever tied to a time, a place, or a person you'll never, ever forget?
Well, I mean, that was a pretty good video. I don't know if it's just the most accurate. I think it's pretty accurate. Maybe it overplayed some elements of the story, but well, I guess that's the point. We'll see. I guess I could invite people in now. I mean, I think I thought maybe, hey, if I could just have other people read a little bit, that's fine. But I think these ones are pretty. These chapters are pretty like personal. I think just from not like in a. I don't know. They're written from my own personal perspective, biographical, I guess you could say. So I wasn't. They weren't chapters I was necessarily thinking somebody else would read when I was asking for other people to read things. But if anyone who wants to come on and that might be useful in case I have to run off screen for a minute. But here we go. Okay. Chapter 42, Learning Music. April 29th, 2011. I had arrived in Paradise, the Paradise to be exact, a well-known Boston rock club. But on that long-anticipated evening, I finally got to see and hear the songs that had shaped my taste and perception more profoundly than any other. 10 years earlier, I was at the tail end of high school, and my passion was playing in bands with my friends. My tastes had changed rapidly over the previous 5 or 6 years. First, a friend from church named Ian introduced me to an Australian Christian pop band, the Newsboys, and I soon discovered the cadre of acts that followed in their wake. Ian and I both played guitar. He was a couple years younger than me. I'm getting a phone call. All right. Uh, okay. Ian and I both played guitar. He was a couple years younger than me, but took to it like a fish to water. I struggled a bit to integrate the lessons taught to me by my blind, left handed guitar teacher, known by his stage name as a children's musician, Mr. G, a local legend and an amazing talent, but not a very good instructor, as far as I was concerned. Of course, the real problem was that I wasn't very excited about learning to play the guitar. The Newsboys were primarily a synth pop band, and Mr. G only taught me basic chords. But lurking in the background was something far more exciting: heavy metal. My brother had been dabbling in this forbidden music, and I was drawn to it as well. Yet, as the son of a pastor, I knew there was something very wrong with bands like Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, and Metallica. At one point, we had watched a VHS tape on the dangers of rock music called Hell's Bells. For a while, I was suitably afraid of being subconsciously influenced by backmasking and other forms of hidden messaging, but ultimately the tape backfired. I'll be right back.
It's a constantly shifting collection of online profiles that we perform for an audience. We've gone from being a character in a story to being the curator of our own social media museum.
Okay, so if our compass is broken and our identity is basically a performance, how do we find our way back? The author's solution is both really simple and incredibly profound, and it's right there in the title of the book.
This is the absolute core principle of the whole book, Tents Before Temples. It means you have to focus on the small, adaptable, life-sustaining things first. A tent gives you immediate shelter. It's what you need to survive the night. A temple is a grand, elaborate project you build for the future. You can't build a temple in the middle of a hurricane if you don't even have a tent.
And here's how the author breaks it down. Tents are the absolute essentials: family, core beliefs, practical skills. They're resilient, they're adaptable, and they're life-sustaining. Temples, on the other hand, are the big, impressive structures we build on top of that foundation: our careers, institutions, all those complex social systems. They look solid, but they're often rigid, fragile, and more focused on status than on actual survival.
The author uses this great historical example. A pioneer's covered wagon is basically a tent on wheels. When they finally stop to build a cabin, they might use the wagon's canvas cover as a temporary roof. The point isn't about literally living in a tent, it's about embodying that principle of adaptability, using what you have to build a solid foundation first. This brings us to the author's blueprint for a way forward, and it's not some grand top-down plan to fix everything at once. It's a return to the basics, starting from the ground up.
So Sartori's blueprint for renewal doesn't start from the top, it grows from the ground up. It starts with what he calls agents. That's just individuals and families who are committed to making a change. These agents then create arenas. You can think of them as little clearings in the wilderness where trust and real community can actually take root. It's from these small pockets of health that a resilient culture can begin to regrow, one piece at a time.
Ultimately, the book leaves us with a direct challenge to look at our own lives and ask what we're actually building and what kind of foundation it's all standing on.
It really forces us to ask a hard question. Have we become so focused on constructing these impressive temples, our careers, our status, our online profiles, that we've completely neglected the tents? Have we forgotten to maintain the foundations of family, practical skills, and core beliefs that are supposed to support everything else?
So we'll leave you with the central question of the book. It's a challenge to do a little audit of your own life. What are the tents, the essential life-sustaining structures that you truly depend on? And are the temples you're building standing on solid ground, or are they built on sand?
Was the audio playing for that? When the video was going? Did you hear it?
Yes, I can hear, I
Okay.
can hear you. Sort of.
Oh. Well, that was the other one, the first one. I had
Okay,
to,
now,
yeah. No, I had to
I,
pay
li-
for.
I like it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's probably better. Like, I mean, I think that's why like people need editors, because you need somebody else to tell you what's important. Everything's important to you if you write it, but you need somebody else to cut out the fat, I guess. So
You said you needed to pay for it?
I had to pay for, not. I mean, it's a month free, but I had to pay for the premium so that I could keep making more videos. So
Oh,
well, we got them. I should be able to get it all done within a month, though.
mhm.
Get probably do one for every chapter, I think. But yeah, everything going good over there? All right. Well, I guess I'll just keep reading the story here. All right. Back up for a bit. As the son of a pastor, I knew there was something very wrong with bands like Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, and Metallica. At one point, we had watched a VHS tape on the dangers of rock music called Hell's Bells. For a while, I was suitably afraid of being subconsciously influenced by backmasking and other forms of hidden messaging, but ultimately the tape backfired. Its greatest influence was providing the names of more bands for us to look up on Napster. I had heard that there was a record label with heavier Christian music called Tooth and Nail, and I wanted to see if what they had to offer would satisfy my carnal cravings. On a trip to the local Christian bookstore, I sampled some of what they had to offer. The band MXPX sounded a lot like Green Day, the whiny, fast-paced pop punk that had become popular during my middle school years. At that moment, I decided that if this was the best that Christian rock had to offer, I would be rocking out with The Enemy instead. Thus, I began exploring lots of rock bands, new and old, reveling in the occasional swear word of tough-sounding bands like Rage Against the Machine. When I realized that what I liked about it was that it was bad, I became much more open to other things that were bad. Some of the kids from church, the ones who went to the public school, were into rap music, and I had a good little phase listening to Notorious B.I.G., Tupac, Snoop, and the Big Timers. There was definitely a certain appeal in the look: cool cars, gold chains, urban clothing. I started trying to dress accordingly, failing to understand that it was a lifestyle of illicit crime that paid for the necessary accoutrements. Fortunately, around that time, I made a group of friends who saved me from the wigger lifestyle. Unlike myself and my friend Ian from church, these kids played guitar, bass, and drums together in a real band. They played at the youth group from the church down the street, but they didn't meet at the church down the street. They had a separate facility in a strip mall storefront with blacked out windows, a large stage, strobe lights, and fog machines. It was actually a legit rock club called the Fire Escape. Footnote, because they were there to help youth escape the flames of hell. End footnote. On Wednesday nights, Jay, Dan, and Steve would play electric guitar, bass, and drums behind Pastor Bob, who sang praise songs and strummed an acoustic guitar. But on Fridays or Saturdays, they often played as a punk trio. The name escapes me at the moment. Playing some original songs and covering one or two from that loathsome band MXPX. They usually opened for a variety of bands from around the area and from states as far away as Connecticut and New York. I wasn't much of a fan of the punk music, but some of the other bands were actually pretty cool. They weren't punk, they were hardcore, metalcore, and metal. When my substantial ignorance of rap music was revealed, I dropped the urban facade in favor of new friendships and soon began to learn the ins and outs of the new genres my friends introduced. Our little concert venue was actually a few rungs up from the bottom of the greater Boston scene and hosted several acts that I later learned were kind of a big deal. I brought my friend Ian along, and pretty soon we were both getting involved in playing music, either on Wednesday nights or the Friday concerts. Somehow I figured out how to do a pretty good metal scream, and that allowed me to join in on a cover of the song Skin Like Winter by Zayo. This progressed into the formation, disbanding, renaming, and reinventing of several bands with overlapping members, and explorations into slightly different genres. I mostly kept on screaming, but I had a lot more opportunities to play guitar and bass on Wednesday nights. Those kinds of guitar skills were very different, but we all longed to explore the possibilities of the melodic in our music. It seemed clear that in the hierarchy of genres, melodic metalcore was at the top. This meant that between the chunky riffs and breakdowns, twinkly, sparkly, clean bits would provide a contrast, something accompanied by real singing. That singing was the real test. You could be respected for all kinds of different screams. It was the vibe that mattered most. But anything more than a few bars of bad singing was a death blow to a band career. Thus, the default vocal alternatives for the twinkly bits was some sort of spoken word, an articulate shout, but lacking melody. Those bands could pull off some real singing, got major respect, with babes crossed out. What soon became clear was that while the melodic metalcore bands were at the top of the local scene, there was another hidden hierarchy with entirely different types of bands at the top. Whether it was the desire for fame or for the pure joy of the music, the bands that the locals dreamt of playing in all fell into the broader category of emo. Yet this word was treated as an insult, a diss on the wimpy, effeminate guys who couldn't really scream or shred or blast a double kick drum. But it was the guilty pleasure of all the hardcore punk and metalcore bands. Up and down I-95 from Boston to Orlando, inside beat-up old conversion vans with trailers covered in stickers, tattooed young men with dyed black hair and gaping holes in both ears recreated the tiny dancer scene from Almost Famous, but instead of Elton John, they were screaming infidelities along with Chris Carrabba. Those faded vinyl dashboards heard countless confessions from soft-hearted rockers fighting back the sharp hint of new tears. I surreptitiously enjoyed Mr. Carrabba's solo acoustic efforts under a facade of cool indifference. The relationship-centric songs replaced the metaphors of classic poetry with comparisons taken from the everyday life of a teenager in the 90s. And this damp air, it's fighting my defroster. My sighs, they ring victorious and fog this tinted glass. And it's clouded, and so is my head. From The Sharp Hint of New Tears by Dashboard Confessional. Others were almost completely straightforward prose, with a melismatic vocalization doing the heavy lifting. All right, I'm going to take a little pause here. I'll be right back. Were you telling jokes while I was gone? What is going on in here?
I don't know. I'm trying to pass the time all by myself.
Sorry.
It's
Is
okay.
Mama's home now, so yeah.
It's absolutely okay. I have provisions of entertainment in my boring room.
Yeah. Well, it's that maybe I need to get. I made more of those little videos, but I couldn't. Maybe I need to figure out how to load them into StreamYard so I can do the branding thing quicker. But all right. Okay.
Yeah, branding. What you should do is pass all those videos of yours into the branding masters of group of the TLC.
Mm-hmm.
Green Gris was complaining that he's missing some new material for his endless repeating branding.
I forgot. I need to check with him because we were supposed to talk earlier this week, but he wasn't feeling up to it. So
I mean, the style is a bit too clean for him, but maybe if somebody will sort of clarify it and add some abstracting music on top.
Yeah. Okay. I was reading the cringy song lyrics. There's so much action, you're getting busy, so I'll call your cellular phone to tell you TV night was lonely without you. From Shirts and Gloves by Dashboard Confessional. The songs provided a useful grammar for deciphering the complex and varied emotions that formed within the mind of a male teenager. The songs had enough universal appeal that an inexperienced newbie on the dating scene could still relate. The feelings from the friend zone were just as intense, even if the action was non-existent. Across the context of a whole album, the stories were vague enough that almost anyone could feel a vicarious mirror of their own experience in Karaba's songs. It was impossible to say if they were the result of substantial breakups or the minor rejections from misread signals. Nor could we conclude if they were derived from the experience of a lone girlfriend or a plethora of relationships, dates, and crushes, real or imagined. It was still an age where speculation occurred about whether or not a couple was doing it, and thus you could emote right along wherever you were, vying for conversations, attempting to hold a girl's hand, or preparing for a first kiss. But all this feeling was experienced below the surface. It could be discussed hypothetically. Yes, a guy that sings songs like this would have a lot of success with dating girls, but does he have anything meaningful to say? And this pointed to the arguments with which we upheld our preference for melodic metalcore. The songs we wrote were substantial. They spoke to the philosophical and intellectual crises of the day. Depending on where a band sat on the spectrum between Christian hardcore bands and hardcore bands whose members happen to be Christian, they would inject more or less scriptural language and themes into their songs, with the most sophisticated drawing upon other sources such as Nietzsche and Kierkegaard. Then all this deep meaning was wrapped in an obscurant cloak of poetry and symbolism before being delivered in inarticulate screaming. In hindsight, it's not hard to see that much of the high gain, high volume, aggressive appearance, poetic language, and obscure themes reflected a deep uncertainty and insecurity about the message being put forth. No wonder chicks weren't into us. There was not much substance in the us to be into. But it was within this fog of posturing and projection that I finally experienced the joy of hearing something that spoke to me profoundly on every level. Creative perfection in audible form. I was in a musical paradise from the first track to the last secret song at the end of the album, and continue to find more to discover on each subsequent listen. It was a sound I would chase for the next 10 years, both in my writing and playing, and online and in record stores, until I finally experienced it in its purest form on April 29th, 2011, at the Paradise Rock Club in Boston. The Moon is Down. Somewhere in or around 2001, I came into possession of a CD with a girlish, extremely pink album cover. Between two photographs of commercial airplanes, the title, The Moon is Down, in reference to a John Steinbeck novel of the same name, and the band name, Further Seems Forever, were printed all lowercase in a sans serif font, with a little stylistic bird icon. The group was fronted by vocalist Chris Carrabba, who had become known for his solo project Dashboard Confessional, and backed by former members of the Florida hardcore band Strongarm. The album began with the sound of an airplane, and as soon as it was about to land, went right into the title track and title lyric, The Moon is Down, and heaven is waiting for us to find her in our sights. I was immediately hooked and remained in that state of attention for all 10 tracks. Having recently re-listened to the album a few times, it's not surprising that it made an impact. It's still an extremely solid album. It's not perfect. The recording quality could certainly have been better, but the songs still hold up. Oh no. Oh, I have to upload a new PDF because I don't have the right words. Mm-hmm. All right, I'll get rid of that. I'll just do it this way. We'll just go with Microsoft Word and read it straight from the current version. Okay. It was recorded in the days when smaller studios of good reputation were still recording. Oh, actually, put this on the other screen. That'll make it easier. We're still recording analog to two-inch tape. Digital had already taken over in the big studios, but the return on investment wasn't immediately apparent for the kind of mid-tier studios that solidly cranked out decent quality indie rock records. The album is somewhat mid-fidelity. The quality of streaming audio does not do it any favors. I wish I still had a CD and some decent studio monitors to analyze it a bit more closely, but I do remember it was definitely a bit muddy, especially in comparison to their later recordings. The style of the music was revelatory to myself, and it was truly unique in many ways, but it didn't present itself as anything special. When I shared the songs with a student recently, he just heard it as a kind of pop rock music. Yet the somewhat familiar sounds emerged from a very strange place, a sort of convergent evolution that developed through the reactionary genre of punk, the intensification and continued rebellion against melody that became hardcore, and a subsequent rebellion against the hardcore scene back into melodic music. It was like translating something into Chinese, then Japanese, and back into English. You arrive at the same place you started, but the message is decidedly different. Besides the limitations of the recording process, it also suffers from some of the quirks of that developed in the hardcore scene. The musicians didn't have the classic rock pedigree in regards to tools and techniques. I am sure they were familiar with the corpus of classic rock, because everyone was prior to Gen Z, but it's almost certain they didn't study the lore of how those classic albums were crafted. Everything was played straight through 50 and 100-watt tube amps with no effects, just like all the hardcore bands. But they turned the gain down and sometimes used guitars with slightly less output. The thin-line hollow-body Telecaster was an extremely popular choice among side project bands in this genre. There are some subtle reverb and delay effects sprinkled throughout the record, with some purposeful application of some hard left-right panning, but most of the tonal texture is very similar throughout. Combined with the fact that many of the guitar parts were recorded by the same guitarist with the same settings, it's difficult to tell where one guitar part ends and others begin. This confusion led to a plethora of guessing online. The band was not massively popular, but in those early days of widespread internet adoption, there were more than a few attempts to make guitar tabs, and they varied widely. I had become interested in the process of songwriting and began taking guitar lessons again. As an example of what I wanted to learn how to compose and play, my Berklee-trained teacher took a stab at it and came up with something wildly more creative as he attempted to integrate what were clearly two guitar parts into one complex arrangement. The exercise was quite instructive in yet another way that a different methodology can arrive in a similar place. But none of this describes what the music was like, nor what made it stand out to me. It's a melodic rock album with some elements of heavier instrumentation, a mix of more upbeat songs, and some ballads. It features several songs in 3/4 and 6/8 time signatures, with hints of the band's hardcore roots. Karaba's singing is good, but not too good. He has the sound of a talented but untrained amateur, someone who is making up for the lack with effort and earnestness. The lyrics sat somewhere between the more obscure poetic and the narrative. There were love songs, but they were a bit more polished, and some of the Christian themes came through in subtle ways. Yet while the songs could have been enjoyed just as easily with a lone acoustic guitar, there was a tapestry of interesting and complementary instrumentation that punctuated and elevated the vocal performance. The guitars, bass, and especially the drums constantly did things that were different and unexpected from the standpoint of normal radio rock, but they all worked to add and not diminish from the song itself. In my mind, it provided a bridge between some of the motifs of the hardcore and metal genres I had become involved with, back to something far more classic and traditional. When I asked my friends about what this type of music was called, they gave me an answer that would send me on a decade-long wild goose chase in search of comparable bands. The album was the quintessence of, and complete exception in the genre, called emo. The search for the missing genre. I had already heard the term emo used in regard to Karaba's other project, Dashboard Confessional, but that was just him and an acoustic guitar. It was singer-songwriter music, made by someone who just so happens to be from the hardcore scene. Further Seems Forever was the first band I encountered within the emo genre, if such a thing really existed. The problem with this designation is like calling Steely Dan a classic rock band. While it's technically true, the person who discovers their love of music listening to Asia will be sorely disappointed looking for similar songs by that designation alone. The designation of classic rock, I should say. The Steely Dan of emo is actually a perfect descriptor for FSF, as they are called. The band includes a variety of interesting rhythmic, melodic, harmonic elements, incorporating elements more akin to jazz or progressive rock than many of the pop-punk type bands that are so often graced with the emo moniker. This distinction was even more pronounced when they played live, as one of their primary guitarists was replaced on tour by Derek Cordoba, a legitimate jazz guitarist with some serious chops, who would replace the more somber slide guitar on the album's closing track, A New Desert Life, with exquisite and often extended jazz solos. Though they would regularly open for acts like Newfound Glory and Brand New in mid-sized venues around the Boston, Worcester, Providence area, they were always the draw for me. I'm not sure when the first time I saw them was, but my great anticipation was tangibly disappointed by one huge factor. By the time their debut album was recorded, Carrabba had already left the band to focus on his Dashboard Confessional career. There were hints about the abilities of his replacement, Jason Gleason, who had recorded vocals for a cover of the NSYNC song Bye 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 on a compilation CD called Pop Goes Pump. Punk Goes Pop. Gleason filled in deftly for Justin Timberlake and his cohort on lead and harmonies vocals, but when he performed live, he struggled to reach the high notes of Carrabba's melodies. He would morph some into screams, sing alternate melodies, going low instead of high, or simply fall flat. To hear the principal execution of the songs I had grown to love executed in such a lackluster fashion was sorely disappointing. The situation improved considerably when the band recorded and released their second album, How to Start a Fire, in 2003. Not only was it a drastic improvement sonically, but the vocal melodies were well within Gleason's wheelhouse. What it lacked was that relatable factor of Carrabba's lyrics. First, consider one of the most popular songs from The Moon Is Down, a song about the uncomfortable, unrealized hope for a resolution in a broken relationship, and I think a true love song called New Year's Project. Your hands didn't move, well, neither did mine. New Year's will bring so much to say, but nothing comes out right. Both of us left without words. Both of us world. It's softer than ever before. And you were the outline of everything you would become, the keeper of these hands, to hold you now. It is a far cry more than anything that I deserve. I'm waiting to give you whatever the world may bring. I'd give you my life because I don't own anything. It seemed like the bottom was all that I had until now. I'd give you my life if you'd give me yours somehow. The lyrics are clear, powerful, and heartfelt. It has all the makings of a classic ballad. In contrast, here are Gleason's lyrics for the album's big single, The Sound, which is a song with a similar theme. If I only had an ocean to complement the sky, I'd pull it down and paint it for you, and I'd never question why. 'Cause red would mean you loved me, and blue would mean you cared, but black my heart when left alone to cold and killing stares. This is the burning of a dream. The sound now turns to silence, but I'll keep spinning around, naked in the rain of my own tears, as they fall into the bucket of your apologies, while closing everyone else's eyes, because your own are shut, not to see the volume rise again. While the lyrics aren't terrible, they do bear strong marks of the kind of insecure desire to obscure intention behind poetic language. Gleason was only 19 years old when he replaced Carrabba, and so signs of immaturity are not surprising. Having re-listened to too much of that album recently, my opinion is much higher than when it was first released. In many ways, it's the exact thing I was searching for, something very similar to the band that had released the CD that got me hooked, but it was in many ways an almost completely different band. The next year, the band would again reinvent themselves as Gleason departed, and their third album, Hide Nothing, featured a third lead singer. This time, vocal duties fell to John Bunch of the band Sensefield, a semi-mainstream act that had some success with the song Save Yourself, featured on the television show Roswell. Bunch was a more technically proficient singer and was able to adequately handle the songs of both Carrabba and Gleason, though without the ability to replicate the unique qualities the former singers had brought to their own songs. At 34, Bunch was much older, a husband and a father. His lyrics tended toward the more timeless themes of faith, though not in a browbeating or explicit way, but simply and clearly conveying the universal meaning of life and death. The song Light Up Ahead provides a perfect example. Take this heart of darkness, I give it all, and in all the emptiness, I refill it all. The times that I feel nothing, you bring enough, so I can live for something, you lift me up. End all these bad dreams, I wake up to the light, and when I can't see, I wake up to your eyes. Wake me up, there's a light up ahead. Knowing that Bunch was a man of faith provided a clear implication that the subject in reference is God, but someone could mistake it in reference to a wife. The music video, a very primitive example of affordable digital animation, portrays an elderly war veteran looking back on a lifetime of experiences. I was able to see Bunch perform a couple times and quite enjoyed his performance, but the challenges of replacing a singer for each album had severely hampered the momentum of the band's trajectory. By far the most technically proficient and creative outfits of the post-hardcore / emo rock scene, they never achieved the commercial success they deserved. After touring with Bunch for 2 years, the band of dads decided to hang up their guitars and focus on home life and day jobs. By this time, my own interest in the local music had waned. My younger friend Ian had parted ways with us to join a metalcore band in Connecticut. He eventually became a skilled recording engineer and producer, running his own studio for several years. Other friends went off to college and never really returned, while a few of us began to devote more of our time to church music. Eventually, we formed a sort of semi-pro worship band, writing and recording a few original songs and performing them with other popular songs of the time at youth events and rallies, sometimes with thousands of kids in attendance. I had gained enough skills to contribute in songwriting and got to play guitar or bass with a few different local groups, mostly in churches, but once or twice in clubs, and several times on different recordings. Though the dream of changing the world by touring in a rock band never came to fruition, I was content in my opportunities to scratch the musical itch. The concert scene grew tiresome as the responsibilities of grown-up life required getting up early, the appeal of standing in sweaty nightclubs for hours on end, unable to converse with friends, began to lose its charm. It would take something rather unusual to get me excited enough to make the effort. Which is exactly what happened when I discovered that in late 2010, Further Seems Forever had reunited with their original singer, Chris Carrabba, and they would be performing in Boston on April 29th, 2011. My friends and I purchased tickets as soon as they were available, looking forward to the day with great anticipation. The date finally arrived, and I got the eagerly awaited opportunity to sing along for my favorite songs with the same frontman who had written the lyrics and could hit the notes, just like on the record released 10 years earlier. In theory, my small addition to the din of voices can be heard in the recording of the song New Year's Project, posted on YouTube by another fan the next day. The band would go on to record another album with Carrabba the following year, Penny Black, which I feel bad for not devouring with the same fervor as the original. But some things can't be recaptured after the passion of youth has faded. It is a very good album, though. The band subsequently had a few other reunions, sometimes with Carrabba, who, despite his own meteoric rise to fame, still regards his former bandmates as his closest friends. The band has also toured in reunions with Gleason and sometimes both original singers. Sadly, Bunch passed away in 2016, but the band has been keeping his legacy alive, performing to raise funds for his widow and children, and they recently released a 20th anniversary remaster of the album featuring Bunch, Hide Nothing. There you go, Yoav. More than you ever expected to learn about a fairly obscure emo band.
Yeah, it is a world I never knew existed.
I have the link. I can play the song from the concert where I was there. I don't know. I know Jacob's all like, don't play music on live streams. I don't think it, but I'm guessing it's like it's somebody's cell phone recording that's been up there for 14 years or whatever. I don't think
Is it on YouTube? Is it on YouTube?
it's on. Yeah, it's on YouTube.
So just post the link.
Yeah, all right. I'll just post the link.
But in YouTube, not in StreamYard. StreamYard. Okay, you can post in YouTube. Yeah.
Post it.
It will not show in StreamYard, but it will be posted in YouTube.
I have to post it in. Like I have to go to the YouTube window and post it there.
Well, I didn't try posting in StreamYard itself.
I'll just do that. I don't know. Does it show up?
Okay. Yes, in YouTube it does show. Yeah.
Okay. There you go. Check it out. And you can somewhere in the noisy vocals, I am contributing as well. Back in time. Back in my bachelor days. Why did I do that?
Nice.
Yeah. All right.
Cool kid. Can you?
Hello, Kirk.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm well.
Did you listen to that reading of that
I
chapter?
listened to the first part, but then I was my mom called me for lunch for the second half.
Yeah, that's what
I just
happened to
came
my.
to hear you read.
That's what happened to my kid too. All right, cool. Well, then I'll go to the next.
Yeah, I mean, I was interested to note that it's sometimes in the lyric you find it hard to distinguish whether it's about God or about his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And this is exactly the principle of the Song of Songs.
True.
It is written so you cannot distinguish between it.
Well, yeah, and that way you don't burn your bridges. You know, it's like I heard somebody saying, "Oh yeah, I guess it was it? Maybe it was Sydney Sweeney or was somebody else? Someone saying like, no, it was what's her name from the Hunger Games? There, Jennifer Lawrence, I think, was saying there's no point in being in celebrities saying anything about politics because all you could possibly do is piss off half of your potential audience. There's no upside to it at all. So it's like sometimes it's good to be a little obscure, you know, like. But that's not what I did in my writing.
Although you can also rile up half of your fan base as well.
Yeah, but what does that do? Make you more making more money? Maybe a little bit, but probably not. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, this is the more reflective chapter, I think, but I think it's also pretty biographical. Chapter 43, Living Music. This story of mine may strike some as peculiar. Where's my mouse? Okay. My fascination with this indie emo band from Florida may seem misplaced considering their ongoing obscurity. The curious reader may be thoroughly unimpressed by what they hear on The Moon is Down, How to Start a Fire, or Hide Nothing, but the important thing to recognize is the impact that music itself plays in the lives of people, and something, whether good or terrible, must first spark the fires of the imagination. There are thousands of inroads to learning and understanding music. Sometimes it comes simply through hearing, sometimes from the desire to express the realities of interior life in an external form. It can be a vehicle for making friends or making money, though rarely. It's a skill and a hobby that can be practiced throughout a lifetime and shared as a gift with others. Music is in some ways the highest of the art forms. Real music, live music, is unique. No two performances are ever alike. Like the river, it is ever changing, constantly moving. Each note vibrates out into the universe, never to return. Like a kiss, it cannot be contained on paper or even in recording. It is lived in the moment and can only be analyzed in memory, but never experienced again. It is the form of art we participate in most intuitively. When we sing joyfully, we warm the heart of God, regardless of our skill or talent. Music is a powerful tool that can directly affect our emotions. While we often decry its manipulative qualities in bringing our minds into the gutter, it can also point our spirits towards the highest good. The experience of singing Silent Night by the light of handheld candles in a Lutheran church on Christmas Eve stirs the heart in a wonderfully positive way. The regular practice of singing praise, worship, and thanks, as the scripture commands, can go a long way in decreasing our dependence on the self-soothing effects of alcohol, screen addiction, and other bad habits. Singing increases social cohesion, lifts the moods, and has physiological health benefits that reduce stress and relieve pain, while improving overall health and strengthening the immune system. It is a true panacea for a great swath of ills, both individually and collectively. Working music. Perhaps the massive popularity of singers like Taylor Swift comes from promoting an increasingly rare opportunity to sing. Swifties regularly sing together in small groups while having a girls' night, going to karaoke, or driving in the car, and they gladly fork over massive amounts of cash for the live concert experience. Much like my experience seeing Chris Carrabba reunited with Further Seems Forever, the audience of Swifties sacrifices their ability to hear well for the opportunity to sing along. The collective aspect of singing is most regularly practiced in church, but it has been in decline for a long time. The common complaint about the modern worship experience is precisely the fact that it mimics the experience of a rock concert. It is not the traditional experience that was once commonplace. Many churches seek to buck that trend by embracing more traditional styles of musical worship. Whether it is the singing of traditional hymns accompanied by pipe organs, or the a cappella singing of the Psalms, these old forms require new training. This is a worthy effort, but perhaps we can be a bit more sympathetic toward those who have embraced the rock concert aesthetic. If we examine the Swiftie phenomenon, the elements of idol worship inappropriate for church contexts are vastly overshadowed by the audience enthusiasm for the participatory experience. In many ways, Swift's appeal lies not in her singular talent as a singer, but in her normalcy. She's the millennial every girl, the mouthpiece for the whole community of Swifties, a first among equals for a 21st century episcopacy of women. Thus, the concert experience within the church is a fitting substitute. It signifies the same sense of belonging, but it is focused on a greater ideal with a superior savior. The loud volume is the antidote to self-consciousness, as people can sing out in the fullness of expression without fear of being ostracized or overheard by singing out of key. But if worship is the primary context for the participation and enjoyment of music, a strong secondary purpose is as an aid to work. Our work should not define who we are, lest we are devastated by events that leave us unable to work. Yet it's also wrong to despise work. We were made to create, improve, and cultivate. Everything that contributes to that goal is worthwhile. Trade jobs are great opportunities for reintegration because they require use of the whole person, including both fine and gross motor skills, problem solving, and interpersonal communication and cooperation. Despite this wide range of skills and operations, our capacity as humans takes much of this work in stride, allowing us to integrate further levels of complexity into our workday. This often takes the form of conversation between coworkers, or we can focus it on listening to something through speakers or headphones. Without purposeful direction, this often turns to rather banal subject matters, sports, news, pop culture, or crass jokes. Such things are often overheard on construction sites. This need not be the case. I've written before that this is one of the key benefits to a trade career that doesn't limit it. As educational materials are increasingly available online, many language-based skills can be learned while working. But there are other times when it would be difficult to focus, or when it's necessary to maintain verbal communication with your coworkers. This is why the most common thing heard on the construction site is music. Music, whether lyrical or instrumental, can often be added on to other activities. It's become ubiquitous in shopping centers, and the characterization of elevator music is an apt description of how music can be used to fill awkward moments when people share public spaces on private business. Different music affects us in different ways. Its rhythms set the pace for the activity at hand. A gym may blast intense pounding music, helping patrons to push themselves past their limits. Yet, despite how much someone appreciates energetic music in the gym, it would be totally inappropriate in a museum or an art gallery. Music has often been an accompaniment to work, from the drums on galley boats that set the pace of rowers, spiritual songs sung during planting time and harvest, to the radios and smartphones of the current day. On most of the job sites I work on, Spanish language music is the most common. And while I am almost totally ignorant of the language, you can still discern different types. Some of it is more in the vein of electronic dance music or urban sounds, while others are more traditional in instrumentation, accordions, trumpets, and guitars. I can sometimes discern a ballad by the lyrics if amore and corazon are mentioned often. Nevertheless, until I can do more research, I will comment instead on the parallels of English music. There are times where you will hear heavy metal being played, and this type of music can be helpful when a task is straightforward, repetitive, and big. The pace can help motivate you and your coworkers to keep going at a fast pace when moving material quickly is what is needed most. I'm always pleasantly surprised to hear worship music of various types. Oftentimes, it's of the sappy K-Love Christian radio type, but occasionally the type of songs that are good for corporate worship are heard as well. These songs are edifying to listen to, and dwelling on the goodness of God and His love is always a worthwhile pursuit while we work. Perhaps one day, if programs like Tectonic School can gain enough influence, we may even hear men singing praises to God together on the job site. But the other type of English music most likely heard on the job site is country music. This is perhaps more prevalent in the South, but I originally took an interest in country music while I still lived in New England, and there were quite a few country radio stations to choose from. Country music. Over the last half a century, there has been a shift in tone in country music that reflects a greater national appeal. Southern-specific references have been toned down, as it instead reflects the lifestyle and experience of working-class people everywhere. In the arenas and stadiums outside metropolitan Boston, country artists would regularly sing to a full house. What is it about country music that appeals to people? It's often mocked by people who believe they have good taste, or it's singled out as the sole type of music to be avoided by more eclectic listeners. When you ask a normie what kind of music they like, it's not uncommon to hear anything but country music. It's not because of a lack of musicianship. The old characteristic of 3 chords and the truth has a bit of truth about it, but it's not because 3 chords is all they can play. It's because they know that sometimes less truly is more. While some country stars may seem unsophisticated, much of that image is the product of PR and marketing agencies. Nashville attracts the best musicians, and the limited availability of touring spots and studio jobs are settled through fierce competition. For an example of what these players can do when they want to show off, check out the song Time Warp by Brad Paisley, a genre-defying instrumental through various tempos and time signatures that features virtuosic performances from his whole band. In fact, my personal interest in country music came through the lens of its instrumental virtuosity. As an electric guitarist, the history of classic rock and the contemporary fields of indie rock had become predictable. Most worship music was highly influenced by bands like U2, and the latter groups influenced by them, such as Coldplay. A formulaic approach to guitar playing and songwriting began to emerge, and it was difficult to escape those narrow constraints. Country music highlighted new phrases and feelings that could inject new life into tired arrangements and provide a new path forward. I took quite a bit of influence from guitarists like Paisley, Keith Urban, and older players like Glenn Campbell. Perhaps the biggest influence was the use of the slides and swells that mimicked the sound of country music's signature instrument, the pedal steel guitar. Here was another bridge back to contemporary worship music, as Black gospel groups had also embraced the pedal steel, though with a slightly different tuning and style of play, called sacred steel, that I became aware of through Robert Randolph. Some sounds could be mimicked on an electric guitar with a volume pedal and a vibrato, while others could be captured with a relatively affordable lap steel guitar. But the sound of whole chord shifts manipulated by mechanical pedals and levers cannot truly be replicated. Eventually, I took the plunge and spent just over $1,000 to purchase a 10-string, 3-pedal, 2-lever steel guitar, the minimum professional grade unit. I have by no means mastered it, but it does capture the sound like nothing else. I think what hooks most people on country music is simply taking the time to notice. Recently, there were a few country songs that made a blip on the news cycle. The first was the song Try That in a Small Town by Jason Aldean, and the other was the song Rich Men North of Richmond by the overnight sensation and apparent one-hit wonder Oliver Anthony. While comments were often qualified by a statement about not being fans of the particular genre, the thematic elements of these songs resonated with people, and many of the reaction channels on YouTube were quite favorable towards both songs, despite being outside their normal purview. I think the divide between those who openly love and those who publicly scorn country music is a reaction towards sincerity. Malcolm Gladwell spoke about this as a divide over sad songs in his podcast episode, The King of Tears, but I think sadness is only one element of this split. Sincerity is about revealing the inner person. When someone sings from the heart on any subject, our response reveals something about ourselves. For those who dislike it, what is often revealed is a deep discomfort with facing the complexities of life. Popular music of various genres is detached. It's about detaching some part of life from the whole experience. From joy, we extract fun. From celebration, we extract partying. From love, we extract sex. From tragedy, we extract anger. Imbibing emotions in these pure forms inoculates us from seeing the reality around us. For one thing, we miss the tragedy of life spent partying, but we also miss the joys of a normal life. There's a period of time where it seems natural to live in this detached mode, when teenagers are distancing themselves and their identities from their parents to find a path toward adulthood. But it's deeply sad when middle-aged people are still infatuated with the musical heroes of their youth. When we look at the careers of aging pop stars and rockers, there's a natural progression towards maturity. The hard edges soften, the frantic tempos slow down, and the lyrics tend to turn inward. If the fans have matured, they will appreciate this change. When they don't, they begin to embody the sad songs that they are afraid to listen to. Perhaps the only thing sadder is when the pop stars themselves fail to move on. If you happen to know such non-serious persons, you may find a chink in their rubbery armor around particular sentimental songs, often written by country musicians. I've heard people have a special spot in their heart for some particular song that was attached to a memory, perhaps from a funeral of a loved one or the wedding of a friend. It's likely the only country song they are familiar with. Some of these particularly sappy songs are no doubt written solely for the sake of capitalizing on these moments and memories. They are in the business of selling songs. But when you listen to country music for a while, you will begin to notice a recurring theme, that the songs are actually about something. Emotions are present, but they are secondary to the experience of what is actually happening. The narrative structure invites the listener to stand in someone else's shoes and walk through a memory of the past. This makes the potential field of subject matter extremely broad, and it is expanding as the reach of country music spreads beyond the southern states. This has probably caused a considerable amount of disconnect in the past, as the lyrics reflected a rural lifestyle with the distinctly southern elements. There is a barrier between the northern and urban listeners. Some elements of this will likely remain in country music even as they disappear from culture itself. Nostalgia is a central theme. The career of a cowboy endures far longer in song than it does in reality. But those external trappings, the honky tonks, the pickup truck, the worn out cowboy boots, are not what makes a country song. At its heart, country music is about storytelling. It gives a format for making the particulars of one man's life universal. Whether it is the loss and regret of divorce, death, or financial ruin, or the joys of hard work, home, marriage, fatherhood, patriotism, and simple songs of celebration, these are all routine subjects for country songwriters. While the particulars may not always be familiar to us in our experience, the way that people relate to those particulars are shared by us all. The country song translates the poetic and emotional truth of life into something we can all relate to. Promoting this act of translation is one of the central goals of this work. By translating the experience of a first century carpenter or tent maker, or a farmer or artist from antiquity to the life of modern man, we can gain the wisdom that they discovered in a particular environment that we can't quite recreate. In his book, Art Needs No Justification, Hans Ruckmacher explains that the difference between the tradesman and the artist is artificial. It's based on human perceptions of value, but the work done well is equal in its value as an act of worship. Similarly, in his book, Jazz, Blues, and Spirituals, he highlights the high spiritual value in the simple folk music that developed in the slave plantations of the southern states. The measurable qualities between Bach and the blues may vary greatly, but the spirit behind them is the same. While the musical genius of Bach glorifies God in the cathedral, pointing to the transcendent beauty and truth of God, the spiritual songs of the slaves put flesh and bones on the gospel. The experience of the Israelite slaves was made real in the songs of the South, and their hearts were strengthened by faith in the God of freedom. Country music has long been overlooked for its aesthetic failings, but I think it shares many of those same spiritual values. It's an echo of the first steps of creation, the transformation of dusty soil into nourishing bread, of fruit into wine, and undeveloped land into hearth and home. If we are fortunate, we may go our whole lives without falling into the dire circumstances of slavery, imprisonment, or oppression. To express our gratitude requires a song. But if we do find ourselves in shackles and cells, the solution is songs once again. They may not always bring down the walls around us, but they will connect us to the humans on the other side. Songs of transformation. If there is, I'm going to take a break. Off. Let's see.
Okay, I think it's time for me to back as well.
Okay.
I'm going somewhere else at the moment. See you sometime. I'm sure you will be around soon. And looking forward to next chapters.
Yeah. Well, I'll finish this one up. I don't think there's too much more, but I know there is a little bit. Maybe there's a lot more. That's okay. All right. Just needed to get a drink in there. Okay. That way works. Songs of Transformation. If there's a singular reason that music needs to be recaptured for our culture to thrive, it's to harness its power for transformation. The common thread between the various types of music I have discussed here is the transformative power of narrative. Chris Caraba's lyrics transformed my understanding of my own emotions and the nature of relationships. I entered into his tales, and his words shaped the perception of my own story. I was the one who had spent too many hours holding up walls, standing in corners and clenching my jaw, watching the ones that I wanted to be. From the song Just Until Sundown by Further Seems Forever. Likewise, I later came to realize that I was the one blaming this all on the moment, blaming this all on my views, blaming the mood on the music, blaming it all on you. Blaming it on the views stirred up a memory of fervent argumentation with God after a bad date with a bad match. Whatever words I said, the meaning was something like, "Why won't you let me have what I know is not your best?" As self-indulgent as those songs now strike me, it was important to go through them to move on. And I moved on from emo to farm emo, my name for country music, which stops in various other genres of rock, jazz, classical music, and even dance and electronic music. Footnote: the Daft Punk album Random Access Memories is fantastic, but I decided not to go chasing other things that might sound like it. I have learned my lesson. End footnote. Each one added lyrical and emotional context in which to view the world. Some are not places I would often want to visit, but there is a time and place for each of them. And when you understand the music, you begin to understand the arena in which it belongs. Thus, all music has a transformative effect, but the most powerful forms of music are the ones most connected to deep things of life. In the Christian experience, the deepest things are the mysteries of Christ, his incarnation, death, and resurrection. The songs that focus on these subjects are often have a deeper and more lasting impact than those songs about the day-to-day experience of the Christian life. And while the resurrection is the pinnacle of the liturgical calendar, the greater joviality of the Advent season has produced some of the greatest music in the Western canon. The aforementioned Silent Night is one, and Handel's Messiah is another. As music is always at the forefront of the Christmas season, it is a time when the borders between secular and spiritual become fuzzy. It's not surprising for a manger scene to crop up in comedies and genre films around the holiday season. And when the spirit of neighborly love is portrayed on screen, it is almost always accompanied by Christmas carols. It is within this context that I most recently experienced the transformative power of music. A few years ago, my wife and I had the opportunity to see Andrew Peterson perform his nativity production, Behold the Lamb of God. He has been touring new iterations of this program for over 20 years. And while I likely heard recordings of it before, the live experience has forever fixed it within my mind. The program consists of 12 songs, which aim to tell the Christmas story, not from the typical starting points in Bethlehem or Nazareth, but all the way back in Egypt, tracing the roots of the messianic promise from the Exodus through the kings and prophets, the exile, and finally, the time of the return, and the familiar story of Joseph and Mary. It is a narrative story set to music, with some elements of humor and whimsy, instrumental medleys of familiar Christmas songs, along with many original tunes, featuring several musical styles. The instrumentation includes the full expression of Nashville professionals, with members of several different folk, country, and bluegrass groups playing dobro, steel guitars, fiddles, and upright basses, along with a classical cellist, several singer-songwriters, the typical instrumentations of electric guitars, drums, and pianos, and a highly featured use of the hammered dulcimer. This last instrument is one that was made popular by one of Peterson's great musical influences, the late Rich Mullins, a man who is as well known for his saintly lifestyle as he was for his musical achievements, who also plays a significant role in my recent musical journey. The performance features the classic Nashville sounds, expertly performed, but also flavors of the popular, if inauthentic, sounds associated with the songs of the Middle East, combined with a series of iconic images of Egypt, the tabernacle and its accoutrements, the winged creatures of Babylon, and the symbolic images of lambs, trees, roots, and branches. The story encapsulates the entire narrative arc of the Bible through the incarnation and into the crucifixion and resurrection, as it celebrates the Lamb of God, slain from the foundations of the earth. The performance brought together far more of the symbolic and narrative elements that point to the significance of Christ than most sermons or nativity plays ever do, and my wife and I were both moved to tears by the expression of worship. In my newfound enthusiasm for Peterson and his music, I also began buying and reading his books. The fictional Wingfeather Saga was an exceptional discovery, but it was his semi-biographical musings in The God of the Garden that made the greatest impact. Peterson wove together elements of his theological and spiritual journey with stories of his influences and the songs he was writing about at various times in his life. His discovery of Rich Mullins led me to explore many of the songs I had heard my mother play in the background growing up, and pick up a copy of one of Mullins' books that I had just so happened to grab in a Goodwill haul. This led me to being greatly impacted by Mullins' essay on Jesus' oft overlooked commandment, and it really is a commandment, to consider the lilies of the field, which later inspired a sermon I got to preach at our church. But perhaps the greatest impact came when I read Peterson's chapter on his discovery of Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings' classic novel, The Yearling. The story takes place in a part of Florida known as the Big Scrub, in what is now known as Ocala National Forest, in the aftermath of the Civil War. Peterson's own story detailed a somewhat painful association with that particular region of Florida. It was where his parents had grown up and where he moved during his adolescence after spending most of his childhood in Illinois. While it was a homecoming to be celebrated by his parents, it was an unwelcome change for Peterson, who viewed the move as the consequence of everything that went wrong with his childhood. Thus, although he was familiar with the association between his new home and Rawlings' beloved novel, he had purposefully avoided reading the tale until his own adolescent son was given a copy by his grandparents. His son was deeply moved by the coming-of-age tale, and so at the age of 40, Peterson finally decided to see what all the fuss was about. At this point, I also felt the need to read the classic novel and found it deeply moving. The story is about a young boy named Jody Baxter, the only son of Ezra Penny Baxter, a scrawny man with an enormous character. Penny was a veteran of the war, and his great desire was to be a father. But most of the children he and his wife conceived were either stillborn or had died in infancy. Born during the waning years of their fertility, only Jody survived. To protect herself from the pain of loss, Jody's mother remained distant and aloof from the boy. But Penny sought to instill all the values and virtues he could into his sole progeny while he still could. The titular character is a young deer whose mother is killed, that Penny begrudgingly allows Jody to raise as a pet. Though he knows the relationship is doomed from the start, Penny sees it as an opportunity for Jody to learn some valuable lessons that the boy is unable to receive from secondhand experience. The story details the year-long adventures of Jody and Flag, as he names his pet. As the wild creature grows, Penny and Jody attempt to keep him away from their previous precious crops by building taller and more numerous fences, but their effort is to no avail. In the course of time, Penny becomes injured, and after Flag eats the budding corn crop meant to sustain them through the winter, Jody has to replant the entire crop by himself. When the deer commits the same sin a second time, Jody is faced with the difficult realization that his family's survival depends on ending the life of his beloved pet. Ezra laments his inability to protect his son from getting his guts torn out by the cruel world, and the story ends with a requiem for both the deer and the once innocent child that had loved him so. Rawlings' novel had given Peterson the opportunity to mourn the loss of his own childhood innocence and make peace with the land that he long resented. As a father of a similar age and a man long removed from the simplicity of my own childhood, I felt all the same emotions. Understanding the dual background of Rawlings' story and Peterson's, I could relive the entire tapestry of emotions and experiences encapsulated in Peterson's song, The Ballad of Jody Baxter. He described it as a dialogue between himself and a grown-up version of Jody, sharing their common laments, bearing their wounds, and shedding the tears that society disdains from boys who are learning to become men. I would recommend everyone read Peterson's chapter and the novel to capture the full experience, but the lyrics can provide a shadow of what the song conveys. The first verse recounts Jody's tale, while the second reflects Peterson's. Do you remember, Jody Baxter, when the whippoorwill sings, how you stole across the pasture to the little hidden spring, where you laid down by the water on a bed of Spanish moss and dreamed? When the wind was on the prairie and the fire was in the stove, with the wood you had to carry from the corner of the grove, and your daddy let you disappear with all your fishing gear into the cove. And it was good, 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 but now it's gone, gone, gone. And there's a little boy who's lost out in the woods, always looking for the fawn. I remember, Jody Baxter, when I hid out in the corn, how the clouds were moving faster with the coming of the storm, and I knew that I had broken something I could not repair, and I mourned, because the field was green as Eden. Then it withered into brown. In the middle of my grieving, they came and cut it down, and I was sure that it was all my fault the day they moved the day they mowed the garden to the ground. What was good, good, good is gone, gone, gone. And there's a little boy who's lost out in the woods, always looking for the fawn. So come back to me. Please come back to me. Is there any way that we can change the ending of this tragedy? Or does it have to be this way? I can see you, Jody Baxter. Now you're broken by the years. As you lie down in the aster and listen for the deer, and I'm a million miles away, but I still pray the fawn can find me here. In many ways, Peterson's song summarizes the entire reason for the effort of writing this book. He and I and Jody Baxter are far from unique. The world rips the guts out of all young men, and often long before they have the ability or the understanding to cope with the consequences. But those wounds can be healed with time and tears, and with stories and songs. What is left for each of us to do is the hard work of looking, listening, and singing out so the other lost boys can find us in the dark. That's the end of the chapter. It's an emotional one. I forgot that it was an emotional one. All right, well, I will I will put out the link and see if anybody else wants to jump in for a minute. Oh, somebody was looking for a link to this Sartori channel. Well, if you're still here, I will put the link. Where is the link? There's another stream going on too. That's where everybody else is. Well, that's fine. Well, there's the link if anybody doesn't have a link to my channel and is not subscribed. All right. Well, if no one else is going to come on, I guess I'll call it a day. I appreciate everybody listening and hanging out. You have some, yes, Andrew Peterson fans. Prom Praise Wonder. Cool. All right. Adios.